Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 162 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, or the DAP Network, if you will. And I will. It's a fun Tuesday. Fun Thursday. The week is flying by. We're here in the start of week 8, and I've got my boy Drew here with me. How are you doing tonight, Drew?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, your Bills are playing tonight, so I'm surprised you're here. I actually was expecting you to be like, sorry, I can't make it. I'm sick, and be watching your team, but I appreciate you making some time for us tonight.
Priorities.
That's right. And again, if something crazy happens, we understand. Let's just leave it at that. But we've got a great guest with us tonight, the one and only Bob Gilchrist. I guess, Bob, where are you even? What would you say your main, like, where are you from? Are you from DTC? Are you from Fantasy Cares? Are you just your own little thing? What do you do?
Bob's in the basement.
There you
go. But yeah, I mean, DTC is where I have been hanging my hat. Fantasy Cares has been a hobby which has been surprisingly growing over the last couple of years, I would say.
Yeah,
that's great work.
Yeah, we definitely have done a lot in the last year, especially. But we'll get into that later, I guess.
Well, and that's actually, maybe we'll just kind of get into it now. This is as good a time as any, right here out of the jump, right? So I'm wearing my Fantasy Cares shirt. I was really glad to help out with the Eliminators this year and just be a part of that. And obviously, it takes a village to make this all work. It's not just one person. It's not even just a group of 3 or 4 anymore. It's kind of growing and getting bigger. And I know, Bob, you were involved in a lot of that back end stuff. We were talking about a little even before. I guess just in case someone hasn't heard of Fantasy Cares or isn't sure of what that is or what you guys do, why don't you just run it through real quick so people can get familiar before we go deeper?
Okay. Well, Fantasy Cares is the first really fantasy sports related 501c3 in the world that I know of. I have not seen another one yet. We basically are set up to fund other 501c3s. So being able to support anyone from JDRF to No Kid Hungry or the many, actually, there's quite a few food shelters that we are involved with. This month, we're doing a breast cancer awareness and donating, I believe, we're shooting for $5,000 to one of our charities that we've supported in the past. And it is 100% free fantasy football related items that, if you like what we do, send a donation.
Like that. Yeah. And I know you guys are doing a lot of giveaways and stuff too. Some like promotional things where you donate in a certain time window, you're entered into a raffle where you can win. I think Justin Jefferson jersey, I think, is the last one I saw. I know there's a ton of stuff.
That was a specialty. That was a special because Scott's birthday,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for Scott Fish. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, the Vikings. It was his one pick of choice for his birthday. That one did pretty good. Right now, we actually at Fantasy Cares /GG is the Devontae Adams jersey is giveaway this week.
That's a fun one. All right. Well,
yeah,
I know
that.
Yeah, I know that there are a lot of different things that make this fun, and I think having a fantasy kind of charity in a way is a very unique thing, and I think it's a really great idea. And I know Scott's been a big proponent of doing more for charity in fantasy leagues, and just kind of having a home base to kind of put all that into one spot. And then, like you said, fund other donation places and kind of, put that money to good use in a lot of different ways. I just think it's awesome. So again, really appreciate you coming on, of course, for that. And then, of course, for letting me help out with it too. So it's great to be a part of it. I know, again, with DTC, Dynasty Trade Calculator, I know you've been there for a little while. I guess, and I don't want this to sound rude, but do you create any content that people might want to know about or that you want to reference here out of the gate?
No.
Love it.
I mean, you've seen my pictures. Even if you don't know who I am, you've seen a picture or two that I've made. There are, I was doing a podcast with John Bosch, and we've been meaning to get back to it. the Dynasty Time Machine, where we
Yeah.
review trades and John tries to guess what player I'm talking about.
Yeah, I love that one. That was always fun.
We've been a little busy getting fantasy cares together, but we will be back.
I like it. I like that. I guess before we get into the news, I don't even know if there really was any news. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up or anything else you're working on right now? I guess just to try to give you some time to promote something at least.
For me, no, everything's tight to the vest.
I like that. I like that.
Everything I'm working on, everyone wants to know.
Yeah,
Even
and
though they
that's why I'm
don't
trying
know
to
that
poke
I'm
a little
working on
more. I'm trying to see what more I can get out of you, Bob. But you're doing a great job as always.
Yeah, no, probably not going to give away any of the secrets.
That's fine. That's fine.
But no, I can't do that either. I was going to say something, but
maybe we can get it out of you later. But with that, I did say, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of news. I know that there was some, like, I would almost call it fake news about Tyreek missing this week. And then, of course, the next day he's back at practice and everything's fine. I guess, was there any news, Drew, that you could think of or that you wanted to bring up in this little section before we get on to the, looking back at week 7 officially?
No, I just saw an update, I think, somewhere that Arizona's activated or gotten Kyler back at practice and taken him off their injury report here. So it seems like we've got some imminent returns there with him, and we've got a couple other guys that we're waiting to see timelines on their return. But I think that's probably one that a lot of folks have been waiting on. I've seen a lot of trades with Kyler this year, specifically people trading out to get, maybe add him to their team if they're trying to shed some points. And then I think some teams anticipating his return, hoping he comes back at the right time. So he was a mid to later round pick for me and Scott Fish this year, hoping that maybe he might put me in a better position if he truly comes back and returns close to form. So he's the only other one that I've been kind of keeping an eye on because I've got him in only 2 leagues, but could be high impact if he comes back.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good piece of news too. And then there's a lot of people that have him in dynasty leagues all over the place that have just been holding on and waiting. I know I've taken a bunch of questions about him too. Like, should I go get him before he activates? And I've said from the start of this, like, well, you should have acquired him when he first got hurt because that was the lowest price. And if you're rebuilding, I've always said that Murray was a great rebuilding asset. Like, if you don't need him this year anyway, like, just go get him now for something and get those points off your roster. So hopefully you've already got him on your roster and you're not trying to acquire him now because this might be a higher price now that he's actually coming back. And that does kind of mean the end potentially anyway for Joshua Dobbs, which is a little sad, but it is what it is. We all kind of expected that was going to happen. So I know I've been rocking him in a couple of leagues. And I think, Bob, you just stole a quarterback from me in Death Becomes You. Is that correct?
I believe so. I believe Joshua Dobbs might have been a part of that.
Well, kind of. Yeah, he didn't help me. And I will be honest, too. I used Juju Smith-Schuster, who got 0 points because I wasn't able to get him out of my lineup in time. So you stole from me in that Vampire League, which is a terrific Vampire Dynasty League run by Ryan McDowell. I just think that's such a crazy idea, Vampire Dynasty League. We'll see how it goes. But it could be very lopsided very quickly. But I love the fact that you guys are sharing a team. It's you, John Bosch, and Matt Price, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a little DTC DLF combo. I like that. That's a way to do it. But yeah, really, there aren't any other news items that I can recall. So I think we're just going to kind of move forward to looking back and looking ahead. So we're going to look back at week 7. Really didn't feel like a crazy week. It felt like a normal week. It sounds almost mean, but like I didn't feel like it was as bonkers as we've seen the last couple of weeks. Drew, what did you think about week 7? Was there anything that stood out to you? Any players or plays or anything that you want to bring up here as we're looking back?
Probably the most recent, looking back at Monday night, I think trying to look at Kirk Cousins here. I forgot, was it you, Bob, who I think put out on the X there, you bet enough on the same thing, you're going to get the right result at some point, or if it was somebody else. But, looking at Kirk Cousins in prime time coming through, got saved by Jordan Addison right before halftime. But what a showing by Addison this year. But really to see the 49ers drop 2 in a row, which, injuries and so forth. But I think a lot of people were expecting primetime Kirk plus the 49ers coming off the loss would equal a different outcome there. But I think I agree. Pretty straightforward. Nothing crazy as far as injuries or, major upsets that kind of shift the landscape of a division or anything like that I can recall.
Well, the only one that I was even going to mention was just the Bears in general, right? With Tyson Bagent. I got the teabag going well. That worked out well for them. We got Deonta Foreman kind of showing back up, and after he had an Achilles tear, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, right? Wasn't he one of those that was like cast
Yeah.
aside and never to come back? And he's kind of showing that he might be a good back. If Roshan and Khalil can't come back this week, then maybe he's the guy again. I mean, not that Las Vegas is a killer team, but I think that whole Bears offense looked different and better without Fields, which is noteworthy in a way because Fields isn't playing again this week. I mean, he's already been ruled out. But I guess, Bob, before you go on to what you thought of week 7, I mean, what are your thoughts on the Bears? I mean, are the Bears for real now, or is this just a mirage?
I'm going to go with the mirage.
I think that's a fair answer. Yeah.
I the other shoe is going to drop for the rookie quarterback, and I'm not going to bet your money on it.
Thanks, Bob.
So that I mean, Fields, I don't think is as bad as it's looking because everything around him is that bad.
Yeah.
He's not getting his fair share.
No, that makes total sense. I would agree. I think there were some other things that maybe are kind of stood out to me in a theory, but was there anything in your mind, I guess, at week 7 that you want to look back and go, oh, that was surprising?
Not really. Besides,
nothing crazy.
There might have been something that happened at Foxborough.
Okay.
I wanted to say it, but I didn't want to say it. I wanted one of you two to bring it up.
I can't remember. There was some game in Foxborough this week that someone thought they were the division champ. And
Drew, do you have an opinion on this statement that Bob is saying?
Red Sox are out, right? Am I thinking the right thing here? Or?
No, different sport. No.
Yeah. Celtics just started.
There you go. Well, so Bob's, for those not sure, Bob's Patriots beat Drew's Bills this week. That was surprising. I would agree. That was definitely not expected. That was, I think a lot of people lost in Survivor for that. I mean, I think a lot of people were predicting Bills by a dozen, that was not expected for Mac Jones. And again, I think that might be something worth mentioning just in general is that Mac Jones sometimes has these games, right? He kind of shows up in weird spots to become, I wouldn't say dominant, but at least serviceable.
Efficient.
And, it was weird. That's the thing about it. So maybe, Bob, the takeaway there is, how do you feel about your Patriots with Mac Jones being so odd? I don't know. How's that feel for you?
I mean, Mac Jones is okay. I mean, he's one of the top 32 quarterbacks in the league.
I like that. Yeah, and I would agree.
I mean, he's gonna play for a while. He's got the first year. He's got a 5-year contract basically because of being a first round pick. Unless they go wild and find a way to get Caleb, he'll be quarterback again next year. So that's what we have, and that we just roll it out there.
Just got to make it happen. No, I like that. And that's the way it's going to be. The last thing I'll bring up, speaking of quarterbacks, and just because I think it's, again, somewhat newsworthy that I was thinking of, was Gardner Minshew looked pretty good for Indianapolis, rushing in 2 touchdowns. I mean, that's not what we think of when we think of Gardner Minshew as a runner or, goal line back in a sense. But, putting up 27.1 points, QB3 on the week, I don't think anybody expected that. Drew, I'll go back to you on this one. Is this a mirage or is this reality? Is this what we should expect from Gardner Minshew every week?
No, I don't think you expect anything from Gardner Minshew. You expect to see things that are all over the board here. And this was an example of, probably the better version of him, right? The better angels of Gardner Minshew this week. And, whether he's playing within himself or things lined up with what the defense gave him and he finally, took what was there versus trying to push too hard. I think a lot of folks, I foolishly, I psyched myself out of playing Josh Downs in a couple of leagues because I also had Michael Pittman, and I'm trying to diversify here a little bit and play the game of where do I want to kind of spread the risk. And, fortunately it didn't hurt me in either leagues, but, in terms of seeding and if points come into play, his 23.5 points in those safe leagues is a big total to forfeit there. So, yeah, I don't think this is going to be a regular thing. I think you have to be just as ready for, 3 interceptions next week with Minshew. But it did look like, Jonathan Taylor seems to be a little bit more himself here.
Yeah.
So hopefully they stay balanced, and maybe a couple extra years. And Minshew, I think, was given up on by a lot of folks, both in fantasy and potentially by the league, just kind of being passed around. So as you mature, maybe he's letting some of that sink in, and maybe he'll value this a little bit differently. It's funny because I'm watching here and I saw Ryan Fitzpatrick was a part of the halftime crew, right? And huge hero in Buffalo. I think we all look back. He would be the behind Jim Kelly and Josh Allen. He's the Bills jersey I want next, right? But a guy that had a long career bouncing around, but I think at some point kind of realized what he had and figured out how to make the most of his opportunities later in his career. So hopefully Minshew is kind of getting to that point, and he could be serviceable. But yeah, it's definitely not what I would expect from him week in and week out.
Yeah, I mean, if you have Minshew, you're probably selling on that and just being like, let me, see if I can move him to a contender, or get a second maybe for him now that you never could have gotten a second for him before. Maybe somebody out there at the late second, a contending second, might be willing to give it up. You never know. We've seen a lot of injuries with Justin Fields. We were mentioning now, being kind of injured and not sure. And then Kyler, of course, has been out, and Anthony Richardson is out. I mean, there's some Aaron Rodgers, of course, going out. There's some contending teams, I'm sure, that could use the help. So I would be thinking about a second for Minshew and another piece, maybe something like that. But I don't think that would be ridiculous. I mean, it's probably a little overpay, but at this time of year and with this kind of stuff going on, you got to get what you got to get. All right. So I think that's pretty good for week 7. I don't want to get too in the weeds because some of it kind of piggybacks on week 8 and looking ahead. This week, we've talked about this the last few weeks, even there are no buys this week. So we had 6 buys last week. And none this week. So thank you, NFL gods, for being inconsistent. I love that. I'd much rather you spread them out than have 6 teams on a bye. That's really annoying. But it was nice putting all those players back in my lineup for this week. That was cool. And I also reminded myself, too, like there were a couple of leagues where I lost last week. Of course, once to you, Bob, like I mentioned, where I'm like, man, I thought I had a good team. And then I'm putting everybody back in my lineup. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. I do have a good team. It's just those guys, like my Bengals are on a bye. You know what I mean? Like I have a lot of Bengals across all my teams, and that it showed. It's just, I'll put it that way. It was a rough week. But with week 8 now, again, full strength, everybody back out there. Bob, is there anybody you're looking forward to seeing this week, or any games that you think are going to be particularly fun for fantasy that we should be paying attention
to? Well, for fantasy wise, I wasn't looking forward to any there. I'm curious to see what the Vikings do if they lose, if they start selling off. Curious to see where the Jets end up after this weekend. And I'm wishful that we see some trades in the league because, every year we say, oh, it's trade deadline time. And it's not like fantasy trade deadline.
No, last year was kind of fun. I don't think it's going to happen like that this year. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few players that could move around. Like Derrick Henry's a prime candidate to be moved. Why would they hold on to him?
Touchdown,
That's
Gabriel
awesome.
Davis. There you go.
I need one more to hit.
Love it. Well, so actually, I'll use this as a break then. So the Jets obviously are playing the Giants, the New York battle, the kind of both home teams. That'll be kind of fun. I am curious to see what the Jets do too. I mean, there was a lot of people that were writing them off after week 1 when Aaron Rodgers went down, and they might still have some gas left in the tank. Like we can kind of see what happens here. Vikings, I'm with you. I think Vikings could be an interesting game. Let's see if they're for real or not, and see if they can beat the Packers. They should, I guess. Eagles, Commanders. Wasn't that the game a couple of weeks ago, like week 3, I want to say, where the Commanders almost beat the Eagles in Philly. So that could be a close one. Now that it's in Washington, maybe that makes a difference. I think for fantasy's sake, the one that I'm looking forward to most might even be tonight, to be honest. Like this has got a lot of fantasy players in it,
The one that I forgot and shouldn't have forgot about is the biggest game, Miami and KC.
Yeah.
That's the one that's fantasy-wise. Can't wait to see what happens there.
Well, Chiefs play the Broncos.
Isn't it?
That's week 9 you're looking at. Yeah, week 9 next week is Dolphins Chiefs.
That would be why I missed it.
That's why you missed it. That makes perfect sense. Chiefs play the Broncos. That should be a good game for fantasy, right? A lot of Chiefs scoring on that one probably, which could be interesting. And of course, my team playing the Niners, that should be a good game for fantasy. There's a lot of players on that team and both teams that should be really good. And now we just got word. I guess that's news we should bring up. Brock Purdy looks to be maybe missing this week, where he's in a concussion protocol on a Wednesday. That usually is a bad sign for Sunday. Looks like he got hurt on the tush push is kind of the speculation from last week, which is kind of ironic being that it didn't work and he got hurt. But yeah, Bengals now go to San Francisco against it potentially anyway, against Sam Darnold. I mean, that seems like a trap game written all over it in my book. So I'm terrified for my Bengals, but there could be a lot of points in that game too. So I think it's going to be a good week. I think there's a lot of really juicy matchups, a lot of really potentially anyway, a lot of good battles. Like even Bears Chargers, both teams that are kind of like underperforming what they thought they were going to be, and just like not sure of their identities, and like kind of sitting in mud, not doing great. That game could end up being great on Sunday night. So I'm kind of looking forward to that.
Yeah, Monday night should be good too. You got Lions trying to bounce back, right, against the Raiders. So hoping that, Goff and those guys can get right. Waiting to see, I hope they do right by Monty and wait till week 10 to bring him back. But, Gibbs could have a big night depending on what's going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe this is a good question for this too. With week 8, obviously the trade deadline is Tuesday, so it's just after week 8. Do you think we see trades even, Friday, Saturday leading into this week? Or is it, I mean, I don't think so personally, but wouldn't that be kind of crazy if we see a Derrick Henry trade on Saturday and he may not even play at all on Sunday if that's the case, right? I mean, like that kind of trade you would think would keep you out a week. So that's something for fantasy managers to keep in mind a little bit here is keep your eye on the news,
That's the frustrating ones, right? Where he's already had a week 7 bye and now he's going to have like a week 9 bye. And then depending on what team he goes to, he might have a week 13.
Well, week 8.
Bye.
And exactly. There
right,
could
so
be
we keep saying week 9, right?
Yeah. We're looking ahead to week 8. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I think for most teams, I mean, you're tipping your hand pretty heavy there. And if you're going to do it by Friday, you would have done it by now, I think. So I think
would
most
think
folks
so too.
Yeah. Are going to be getting through this weekend, seeing what they got. And then, I hope Monday, Tuesday are active and we get to see some interesting things there. But, the NFL continues to put out a good product here. So it's tough because I think a lot of teams, even AFC East, Bob alluded to it earlier, coming into August, I certainly was optimistic that we would have a pretty good handle on the AFC East here, but it is still up for grabs with Miami losing as well, right? So I was glad to see that the Eagles were able to pull the win out there to keep Miami within striking distance. The Bills have the head-to-head at this point. But, of course, now the Pats have a head-to-head against the Bills. The Jets have a head-to-head against the Bills in week 1. So these are the things that make week 16, 17, 18 meaningful. So, I don't know. I'm preparing myself for a pretty dull Monday, Tuesday, and I'll be grateful for whatever we see that, kind of tips the scales one way or the other for some of these teams.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if there was going to be a trade before week 8, we probably would have seen it happen so that they could get him on the field for week 8, right? I don't think it's going to, have we ever seen a trade where it's like the day before a guy is supposed to play? I feel like that happens in baseball sometimes, right? Where you get like a trade where they end up making a guy inactive or he's not in the lineup, but he plays the next day because baseball's every day, right? This is not baseball. This is not what you see. So I don't think that's going to happen. There's a lot more to install, a lot more to train, a lot more to learn. So I'd be shocked if something like that happens. But maybe the next best question that we can think of, since we're looking ahead to the trade deadline here too, Bob, what trade would you want to see for fantasy? Like, is there anything that you're, hoping happens?
Got me there. Wow.
Well, Puff Pass Kick put one here. Is like better be a Devontae Adams trade. Like what would a Devontae Adams trade mean for fantasy?
Let's to the Niners. I mean, you got the Niners. You got actually Kansas City would probably be
Kansas City would be awesome, right?
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
That was ridiculous.
Send him to Kansas City, and you just hand them the trophy.
Unfortunately, that might be tough.
Or you could send Derrick Henry to Buffalo.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Like, and I was going to ask that to Drew. Like, are you hoping for a Derrick Henry trade to your Buffalo Bills? I mean, obviously their week is already started and will be over before.
Yeah,
that might not be a bad fit, right? Get Henry on Saturday, right?
He might have to publicly apologize to Josh Norman, but I think Buffalo would appreciate him.
Well, I'm just thinking that too. As a Bills fan, do you want Derrick Henry, Drew?
I'd be fine. What I want is a healthy defense, more than anything. I think with the tools that we've got, we have an adequate running game between Josh Allen. James Cook is certainly, I think, adequate. I know he's not great for all 3 downs, which is a little bit tricky. But the offense is producing because you have Josh Allen. Kincaid is looking good so far. Now that Knox looks like he'll be out for a little bit, Kincaid should definitely get the bulk of the reps there and some good targets. And Gabe Davis, love him or hate him, the guy comes up big in different moments. So it's not like we have absolute trash behind Stephon Diggs. And by the way, you forget about Diggs for a minute, and all of a sudden he's got 8 catches and 100 yards, right?
Yep.
So for me, it's losing Matt Milano and losing our secondary, that hurts more. So I would love to see, if you have an aging, a veteran, like I loved when Von Miller got here a couple years ago. I hate that we haven't been able to put him in the defense regularly. So if I'm looking, I know that's boring for a lot of our fantasy folks, unless you're in an IDP league. But if I'm thinking pragmatically for what would give us the best chance to win, we need some help on some defense here, more than I think I want to stack the deck offensively.
Yeah, I think that makes sense too, given your not weakness, but given the one thing that you would want to fix is not your running game. You have other things ahead of that. That being said, if if the Titans are looking to rebuild and are willing to give him away, I mean, you wouldn't. I don't think you'd tilt your head and say, "What the hell are we thinking?" If you sent a fourth round pick or something, there's got to be a price,
Yeah. What I'm afraid of is that Philly's going to swoop in and make another ridiculous deal here. I saw a funny tweet the other day too, right? If I forget who the Titans GM is here, I'm in Nashville, but if they get a call with a 215 area code, just decline the call, right?
Block it. Yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah. The Eagles are doing some moves. They got Kevin Byard, right? That was the trade you're referring to. Yep. Pretty big deal. I think that helps their defense get even stronger. So that's a little scary for the NFC. Again, there aren't that many, in my mind anyway, there aren't that many trade candidates that are kind of like floating out there still. But the one that I keep coming back to is I would love to see Hayden Hurst back in Cincinnati. I thought he was perfect for that offense last year. Cincinnati still doesn't really have much in the way of tight end work, with Irv Smith just not getting a lot of love. And I think if it was Hayden Hurst and that energy, the momentum that he brings on drives in the locker room, in the huddle, like maybe that's the missing piece that this offense is needing, that had last year and doesn't have now. I don't know, but that's more of a wish than a reality. I don't see that happening. I don't see the Bengals trading anything at this point. They never have. I don't think they ever will. The only time I would see that is if they were way out of it, which they're not. So I don't think that's even, like, if they were over, maybe you'd see a trade, but even now, I don't think it's going to happen. So I'm curious, I guess, to see what happens. I'm going to be excited, and hopefully there's something, like you said, Drew, like I'm just hoping there's something to talk about, I guess, hoping there's some sort of news or something, but it's probably going to be boring. Like we just, we got to get used to that. It's more likely to be boring than not. Anything else you guys want to bring up for week 8 before we spin this show forward?
No.
Yeah, I like it. Now, week 8 too, I wanted to mention this. Week 8 is halfway for a lot of fantasy leagues, if not all of them. You're past the week 7, and that's where a lot of leagues start playing playoffs in weeks 13, 14, all that. So you are at the halfway point of your regular season in most leagues, in most formats. It's nice to have no buys this week, and it's nice to have your full, battery of opponents, or battery of players, I guess, for your team. But your opponents are going to have their full battery too. So it makes it a little tricky. That being said, halfway is kind of where you start to make some decisions. At least that's when I make some bigger decisions. Like, do I really have a chance? And I wanted to mention this as like a little bit of a deeper topic. Bob, being part of DTC for as long as you have and kind of talking a lot about trades, obviously we've got a long way, not a long way, I guess, but like a month or so until the fantasy trade deadline. But I'm looking at this like this is when I start making trades and making moves to start deciding what my team's going to be, not only for this year, but for the future. And it's actually, we've got 3 trades here in the Listener League updates that I'll go through, and they're all very similar. They all involve one player sent for a 2024 third. And I think these are exactly the kind of trades I wanted to mention, at least at some point here. If you're contending, I have no problem at all sending away a 24 third for really any of these guys, if I'm being honest, because 24 thirds are kind of like, who the hell knows, right? You might get Tank Dell. You might get lucky on something like that. You might get, obviously, a Puka Nacua was even a 4th round pick in most leagues. That doesn't happen enough. Those are outliers. I think sending away a third for points is a smart move. We'll go with the first one here in DJ1, which was a 24 third for Tyrod Taylor. Drew, I'll kick it to you first. If you're QB needy and you're really wondering, hey, maybe I need another QB or a third or fourth even, would you send a third for Tyrod, or is it just more of a short-term thing? You're not really interested?
I mean, it's short-term, but at this point in the season, if you know you need wins, if you're looking at 5-2, 4-3, and you look at some of your upcoming matchups, and you know that every win starts to matter at this point, I'm fine with that. I mean, the third is a dart throw at this point. So He was a former Bill, right? So he was typically
Yeah.
very, very conservative, a good game manager, typically didn't give the ball away. So you're not, especially if you're in some of these leagues where we copy Scott Fish and we've got, -4 points for an interception or something like that. He'll do
Yeah.
fine for you. And, the Giants look good with him, right? The Giants look like they are efficient and a decent offense with him. So good game manager, not going to hurt you. Probably not going to have a super high ceiling. He's probably still sneaky mobile, which was something that we appreciated when he was in Buffalo. Maybe he had done more, but yeah, I'm fine with that, even if
Yeah.
it's
And
only for a couple of weeks.
I think that the other part of this kind of discussion in theory would be, does Daniel Jones like finish the season? I mean, like they just paid him a ton of money, but he hasn't looked great, and now he's hurt. I mean, if the Giants don't beat the Jets, they're what, like 2 wins for the season? Like at some point you just got to think about, like, let's shut him down and maybe you see what Terod's got and you make a trade down the road or something like in the offseason. Bob, what do you think about this one? Again, as a trading fan like myself, which would you rather have, a 24 third or Terod Taylor?
I'll take the third.
Take the third. All right. So you're out on
Yep.
Taylor, or just in general, you think a third is going to hold value better?
I mean, I don't think Taylor is going to move the needle for anything, whether I'm adding it into a trade or if I am. It's just going to cost me points if I'm tanking. I'm not interested in having Taylor unless it is just to back up Daniel Jones. Your trade market is small because that's the only guy that really wants him.
Yeah. Well, I think I want him on some teams where I'm just QB needy, where I'm like I'm feeling uncertain. I know there's one league where I've got well, actually, I think it's in the Death Becomes You league. I've got Jalen Hurts and CJ Stroud, and that's it, right? Like if you only have two options, I could see that being like, well, let me at least add some, like a third choice here. Let me see what else I can get. But being a vampire league, it's a little different than normal dynasty anyway. But my point is, there are probably some teams out there that I could even think of in Superflex. Only Superflex do you want this? Let's be clear. You don't want Terod Taylor in one QB. I don't think at all. But yeah, I mean, any starter is sometimes worth it. But I don't think we give enough credit to the fact that you don't have to start a quarterback in that Superflex either. There are definitely times where you could start a receiver or a tight end if it's tight end premium and have a higher floor and a higher ceiling than Terod Taylor. So you're not wrong. I think Terod Taylor has probably got some of the shine from the last couple of weeks, but is he really a long-term future kind of solution? I doubt it. I'm with you on that. And I think too, if you're rebuilding, you definitely don't want Terod Taylor. Like, give me the third, right? Like, let me just hold on to that. All right. So that was the only trade we had in DJ1 this week. We got two of them in DJ2. These are 14 teamers. And I think this is Phil M pretty much deciding, I'm rebuilding. I want these points off my roster. He made both of these trades. The first one, he sent Jonnu Smith for a third. The second one, he sent Justice Hill for a third. I don't really think either of these are that exciting or worth mentioning, but it's still the kind of trade I was talking about before. Like, if you think you need points and you think Jonnu Smith is a guy, which I personally do not, but Dynasty Eeyore was like, yeah, I'll take Jonnu Smith. Let me see what happens with that. And then the Laughing Lizards are the ones that got Justice Hill. I mean, I wouldn't make these trades. I would prefer the third on both, but these are basically where I'm going. I guess, Drew, what are your thoughts when you saw these come through? What did you think of these?
I would much rather have Jonnu Smith over Justice Hill if I had to pick one of them for the third, especially in a tight end premium. And I mean, you look at the targets that Jonnu's had, it's 4, 5, 6 targets a week here, which again, when I think these Junkies leagues, are they 1.5, 2.0?
1.5, I'm pretty sure, for tight end.
1.5. Yeah. So it's not a huge premium. But again, if maybe you've lost some, if you didn't get one of the top guys and you're just kind of cycling through your best options, I've got a couple of leagues where I've got Jonnu and Logan Thomas together, and it's just I'm waiting for Logan Thomas to get hurt, and that'll make my decision easy. But I saw somebody else post on Twitter earlier. I just traded a third for the Falcons tight end one, right, as a kind of a little bit of satire here.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with sending a third for Jonnu if you are a team that is looking for those points, or maybe you need some flex. You're looking ahead at week 9 like we are, and where buys start to kick in again. And sure, spot starter too for Jonnu, and maybe he's good depth if you've got another tight end that maybe is hit or miss or injury riddled in the past. So I personally like the third for Jonnu way more than I like Justice Hill for a third.
Could you imagine if the Falcons had a guy like Kyle Pitts? I mean, like that would just be amazing. Oh wait, I'm being told they do. They just don't remember. This is ridiculous to me, but I completely agree with you. Jonnu Smith has value, which is not. This is the first time I've said that in 2 years. But at the same time, it's because they're not using Kyle Pitts somehow. It's so frustrating. Bob, what are your thoughts on these two players? Do you agree that Jonnu Smith is worth a little more than Hill?
Yes, probably. Yeah.
Are either of them worth a third? Maybe that's the better question.
Yeah, they're both worth a third. Thirds are worthless.
Preach.
I don't even look at third. If somebody is trying to trade and they respond and add a third, okay, whatever. I want
sure.
The other.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, it doesn't even hit my values. The Jonnu Smith is exactly what we wanted out of Kyle Pitts. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
he's getting the amount of targets Kyle Pitts should be getting. Maybe it's like Taxi Squad. I don't know how it works. But he is putting up points, and you can't argue with that. I mean, there's other players like that in the league too, like Jacoby Meyer. Nobody adds him. I looked it up. He's like wide receiver 24 right now.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the type of players that you can sneak into your lineup, and the other guys are all the other league mates are like, why are they winning? Well, Jonnu Smith is averaging 8 points a game. Okay.
That doesn't hurt. Yeah. And I think too, in tight end premium, I mean, that's the kind of player you like, somebody that kind of is dirt cheap or free almost. And thirds are free in my book. And you can put in your lineup and feel at least like you got something there. That's not terrible. I know Puff Pass mentioned this. Actually, we were talking about Terod, and I want to mention him too. But Tyson Bagent, I mentioned him earlier. Is that a long-term fix for the Bears? I don't think so. But if you need a quarterback, I could see sending a third for that too. If you're QB needy or something, if you've got injuries, because there's no buys this week, or if you're looking ahead, maybe you're thinking, hey, I've got Fields. I need to back that up because if he misses another game, like Bagent didn't look that bad. But I think sometimes too, I don't want to say we forget about it, but let's not forget that sometimes defenses don't know what to do when a new QB comes in there, right? When you get somebody who hasn't played at all, there's no film on him. You don't know how he's going to do. And he connects with Tyler Scott a lot, right? Because that made sense to me too. Like they're both practice squad guys. They're both like, he's got that repertoire. He's used to playing, that rapport with him. He's got that idea, right? So that could be another change, is that, someone like Tyler Scott could become a little more valuable, and we could see DJ Moore dip a little. I think I was on Trade Addicts, and I think Rocky mentioned, is this the best QB that DJ Moore's ever played with? I'm like, we got to stop doing that, guys. Like, it's like, no, I don't think so. Like, I'm pretty sure it's still Justin Fields, but that's what's so funny about his career. He's just had so many things. Anyway, so I wanted to make sure at least I mentioned that. Thank you, Puff Pass, for that combination there. And I think this is something else I wanted to get into here too. Thirds aren't worthless. Pretty sure Drew used his third to snipe me on Puka in the league. That's
sure did.
A fair point, but it's so rare that doesn't happen often enough. That's the outlier. That's
every 10 years or so.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we should be trading for 2033 thirds? Is that what you're saying?
Stop.
10 years. Talk about worthless. My God. All right. So I think that pretty much covers it on those trades. I do want to give a quick update too. In DJ1, the Junkies team is 8-3. Funky Bunch is still in the lead at 10-1. So we're right in the hunt there, which I love. DJ2, Rocky and Scott and myself, both of our teams, all three of us in that one, are 3-4. And Andrew Imber's team is 6-1 and in first place. So Andrew Imber's been dominating so far, and it stays true. But now DJ3, we are in first place at 5-2 with 11 victory points, tied with the best hooker, which again, great name on that one. So again, lots of good updates there. Our teams are doing okay and in the hunt. I know, Drew, you're in DJ2, right? Or is it 3? I forget which one you guys
I think it's 2. Yeah, I think it's 2.
Yeah. How do you feel about your DJ2 team halfway through the season here? Do you feel confident?
Oh, we are tanking spectacularly. However, somehow with this damn victory points model that you guys put together, somehow we're still third from the bottom. But I need to look at the bylaws and see, are we a potential points league here for draft position, or what does this look like?
I'm pretty sure it's victory points, but we'll have to take a look. Either way, you're the lowest 3-4 team, right? So that's something. You've got, it looks like the third worst scorer in 794 is the third worst, right?
Yep.
So you're down there at the bottom. That is for sure. Phil M, who we were just talking about, is one behind you in 13th place with 2 and 5. So, and then Demolition in Progress, which is the team name for 0 and 7. That team is purely punting.
I mean,
and only has
Tyson Batchin is our
point.
best quarterback right now, so that should give you all the information that you need in a 14-team Superflex league, right? And
It's
we've
not
been working
ideal.
hard.
Yeah.
We've been working hard. We actually made a trade, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago when we sent one Tony Pollard to get JSN before he had a decent week here. So we still have Joe Mixon that seems to be nobody wants him, and we can't get anything of any kind of value. I think I'm afraid we're going to get to a point where we're going to have to take one of those forgettable thirds for him if we don't move quickly, or if he doesn't come back off the bye here and score a touchdown this week. But otherwise, I think Josh and I from Fantasy Timeline, we've been managing the team together for the last year or so. And overall, I think we realized that we needed to throw in the towel quickly this year. And so far, so good. But please, somebody come and get Joe Mixon.
Yeah, maybe I can make a deal with you there because I like Joe Mixon, obviously being a Bengals fan. I don't need Joe Mixon, but I'm trying to contend him right in the middle. Maybe there's a deal we can work out for the show.
Get him cheaply before he gets 2 touchdowns this week coming off the bye.
Trust me, I'm thinking about it. Because again, that's kind of what ends up happening with them. But I'll see what I can do. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I got to look at some things, but maybe we can make a talk there. So, all right. So with that, we're going to get into our final segment of the night, which is our Find Me a Trade segment. And again, I gotta love Brian Hart for this. I gotta play it every time.
Find me a trade.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you, Brian. We are going to find a trade. This one was submitted by Jim Mack at Mac in the USA on X, I guess is what we'll call it. It is the Iron Throne League. His team name is CD's Nuts, which is always kind of fun. I've got a couple different leagues where I've got somebody making a CD's Nuts type of joke, and it always makes me chuckle. So thank you for that, Jim. It is a 14 team, since we were just talking about 14. It's a 14-teamer Superflex PPR with a full extra point for tight end premium. So it's a 2.0 tight end premium, which is pretty crazy. It is a start 12 too, which for a 14 team to be start 12 means you're getting deep in those nuts. You got a QB, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, 2 tight ends, and 2 flex and a super flex. So this is not only is it a 2-point tight end, but it's also 2 tight ends. So in this case, you're looking at, you need some sort of tight end love, right? Jim's thoughts. I took this from the notes that he submitted, and I asked him for an update. That's what the 2 of these are. But he tanked last year, made some pretty aggressive moves this offseason to make a run, but he needs some depth in this format. I would agree. Maybe a young wide receiver, pivot down, or use some extra capital to shore up quarterback, tight end, and running back. He does have a pretty strong starting lineup, but has been pretty lucky. Needs to address QB as he lost Anthony Richardson, which we'll both get into here, you and me, Drew. And then the other 2 are Fields and Dobbs, which we just mentioned. The clock might be ticking on Dobbs. There are a couple of absolute tanks in the league because it's active but not reckless. Everyone is pretty sharp. I love that info because that's what we always talk about with trading. You need an active league. You can't have a boring league that doesn't talk and isn't sharp, doesn't know what they're doing. You have to have someone willing to trade with you if you're going to make trades. I'll quickly go through his team. I'm not going to bother pulling it up because it's a 14-teamer and it's a sleeper league, so it's a little tricky. But he's like he said, he's got Anthony Richardson, Justin Fields, Joshua Dobbs. Then he's got Mitch Trubisky and Brian Hoyer as backups. Running back, he's got Jahmyr Gibbs, Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Hall, Jaleel McLaughlin, Samir White, Julius Chestnut, Craig Reynolds, Tyrion Davis-Price. Like there's some names, Justice Hill we talked about, some names in there. That's not a terrible running back room. I don't mind that. Receiver, he's got A.J. Brown, Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, CeeDee Lamb, Darius Slayton, Jamal Agnew, and it kind of falls off a cliff. But again, the Waddle, Lamb, Brown, and Pittman, that's a pretty good starting 4. I don't mind that. And then the tight end position, Kyle Pitts, which I'm guessing he was expecting to be dominant, as we all were. Kyle Pitts is his best tight end, I guess, with a question mark. He's still got Greg Dulcich, Trey McBride, Brock Wright, Durham Smythe, Charlie Kolar, like just not a lot there. But then he's got all of his picks. And I will say this too, as much as he says that this league is active and does make trades, I don't see any trades with picks on these.
Everybody
rosters.
has all their picks.
Everyone has their
years.
own picks for the next 3 years. Yeah. So that makes me wonder if his active is different than my active, but that's okay. We're going to let that go. But I would say looking at this, his weakest spot is tight end, and you have to start 2 So I'm starting Kyle Pitts and Trey McBride and just praying, like hoping
Yeah.
that that's enough. I mean, that's a little weak, but I guess Bob, I know we were talking about this a little bit before. Were you able to find a trade yet, or do you want us to give you a little more time?
There are a couple.
Okay. Okay. Well, here we'll let you go last. You're the guest. We'll let you go last. Get some more of those ideas together. Mine was the easiest or quote unquote simplest, and I think it actually pivots well into Drew's trade. So I just want to make sure we hit on this. But mine would be to send Richardson, since he's hurt and done for the year. Send that to garbage man Caleb for Stroud straight up if you can. I don't know if that trade gets done, but 3-6 months ago, Richardson was going ahead of Stroud in most leagues. I don't think that's crazy. And garbage man Caleb looks to be on a rebuild already. He's got Jamar Chase, but after that, I don't know if there's really anybody on this roster I would consider holding in a rebuild. Every tight end is pretty much trash. Every running back, he's got Dobbins, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Chuba Hubbard. That's it for running backs. Quarterbacks, other than Stroud, he's got backups in Baker Mayfield. So, like, if I was this garbage man Caleb, I'd be pivoting hard into the future. And there are some people out there that would rather have Richardson than Stroud long term. Maybe they don't trust the Texans. So I think that trade might get done. But if you have to add a little piece to Richardson, I'm fine with that. If you have to add a backup or some sort of running back or whatever, or a future third, like we were just talking about, something that doesn't mean much, that's fine. I don't mind doing that. But what did you think about that one, Drew? And I know that you had a trade that was very similar. So I wanted to get to you first.
Yeah, I like CJ Stroud. Funny enough, I was starting to probably float some ill-advised trades out there a couple of weeks ago involving your own Joe Burrow to get CJ Stroud. Seeing if I get Stroud plus a little bit. But yeah, I would actually hope, based on the idea that you have Richardson as a running quarterback, that maybe you might be able to get one of those less meaningful thirds on top of Stroud back, just to be able to hedge a little bit with another dart throw. But yeah, I don't hate that at all, just to get another starting quarterback, knowing that he's got, Fields that's coming off injury and he's going to need some startable guys there. I love these types of leagues. I mean, you're talking 168 top players every given week being started, which means that depth and quality both matter. Which I think really tests kind of the mettle of fantasy managers on how do you want to build. I love that he's got kind of a top heavy team that's done well. And yeah, I get, luck is a part of everything, but you build a team that's pretty top heavy that should win week in and week out, minus some of these fluky weeks. And then now mid-season, you start to take advantage of those opportunities to add depth where maybe people don't see value like you do. So altogether, I don't hate it at all. I mean, you're trading age for age. It's rookie for rookie.
Yep.
And you have Stroud, who I think, at this point, looks like he will stay healthier, perhaps, if he's not taking some of the hits. I don't know that. Did Richardson start a full game before he went on IR?
Well, yeah, I thought he played at least one full week, and then the second week is when he kind of got hurt. But I thought he played at least 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, even, I think, actually.
Yeah. So he's putting himself out there, which you love the upside. You love the rushing quarterbacks. You love the ceiling there. But again, you already have that in Justin Fields when he comes back, right? So in Superflex, I love balancing that a little bit. I know there's some folks that go full tilt, full on, and say, okay, great, give me 2 running quarterbacks that have nothing but upside, and I'll kind of live with the pendulum swings of maximum ceiling, and then great, I might be starting Tyson Badgett and a Tyrod Taylor for a couple weeks just to make sure I fill the roster.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. Bob, what do you think about the Richardson Stroud combo? Is that something you would want to make a move, or does that not feel like enough for Stroud anymore?
It's not enough for me. I'm lower on Rich than many people are. The injuries in that first season is tough to overcome, mentally and physically. So for me, I have Stroud probably. It's going to cost you a second with Anthony Richardson to get Stroud.
I think that's a fair point. And I think the way that I looked at this was they were very closely valued in the past. That is not current, right? Like, let's look at it this way. Like, that is not necessarily the same now. But I know plenty of people that hold on to that value and don't give it up. And then would look at this and say, well, Richardson was ahead. If I'm not playing for this year anyway, like maybe I just look for the future and maybe I like Richardson, maybe I liked what I saw. You never know until you send the offer, right? That's one of those where I might send a DM on the guy and just be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or I send the offer blind and just see what they do. Because I've had some of those where I send it and I'm like, I wouldn't accept this if I were them, but I don't know. Like, I don't know how this works. Maybe they like it. You never know. So I thought that was an interesting angle. And it was something that, again, doesn't really address the needs at tight end, but I would much rather have a solid second quarterback in this 14 teamer. If you're going to have Fields, who is already looking a little bit injured and maybe not washed, but not steady, you need something if you're going to go into this season and try to win. And if you tanked last year, I don't want to tank again. That's the other thing that keeps coming back to. Like, I don't like tanking multiple years if I can help it and just donating league fees. So if I tank last year, I want to go in this year. That was my thinking. But Drew, what was your trade? I know you had a couple in there for Richardson. I feel like we all kind of hit on Richardson at some point here, but what were you thinking, Drew, to help Jim out here?
Yeah. First note is that, I love the context that we have. I would love to know standings and, how is rookie draft position determined? Is it important to shed some of those points, or is it really based on your record here? But at face value, the first one I looked at was with Benny Rader. Is it Benny Ralders 10? I was looking at
Raiders,
Raiders, yeah, for Richardson, for Cousins, and somebody that Bob mentioned earlier, Jacoby Myers, who is quietly wide receiver 2 this year, and maybe a little bit more if you can get. He's got a little bit of running back depth there. My ideal would be like, can you get a Monty back? And if you have to add a little bit to the Richardson side to get there, you get Cousins, who is performing well at this point, who will be kind of that steady Eddie to complement Fields and his upside and kind of his volatility. You get a little bit more depth with Jacoby Myers, that even if he levels out at a wide receiver 3, a top 30, 36 wide receiver for the rest of the year, when you're looking at his starting wide receivers of Lamb and AJ Brown, you can certainly afford to just add some depth there with 12 starters. And if you get a flex type running back to throw in, I think he had Kareem Hunt even on his roster, which I could be convinced to say, you know what, throw him in and I can spot start him. Maybe he'll come on in the playoffs here, or now with Jerome Ford possibly facing injury. So that's one of those, like, I'll give what some people maybe see as $1 worth value, and I'll take 5 quarters back.
That's not a bad idea. I don't mind that. And I think too, with the way you were talking about there with Richardson, even, and kind of thinking on the lines of Cousins is a great quarterback for now, but not a great quarterback for the future, because we just don't know what's going to happen there. I mean, hell, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Cousins getting traded this year and he had to waive his trade clause and all this. I don't think that happens, but that talk is not good for Dynasty. That's inconsistent. So I don't mind that. I think that Cousins, Jacoby, and a little more would be awesome. I would love that side for Anthony Richardson. Like you said, to fill up a couple of these depth spots that you're going to need. If you can trade that away and kind of push all in, I think that's good logic. Bob, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I'm on board with both of them.
Very nice. Well, then what trade did you come up with? I know you mentioned you had a couple. I love your first one that you put on the sheet. I think that's pretty brilliant. But what else you
got? So yeah, you can send a third for Janu.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense on this team. That's perfect. No one's
100%.
traded picks. You can give a third and get Janu, and you might actually need him every week. Come on.
So I've got send AJ Brown for Bryce Young.
Ooh.
Now,
okay.
The reason I'm sending AJ Brown instead of Anthony Richardson is AJ Brown's value is peak. He's got nowhere else to go, right? I mean, he's not going to overtake Jefferson. The only place he's going is down. So I'm going to move him while he's peak. Keep Richardson. Give him a chance. Maybe his value comes back. So I'm going to increase it that way. So that's why I'm thinking you send AJ Brown for Bryce Young. You might have a chance. The Dutch Dynasty there has a need for wide receiver. They also have a need for running back. Send him Swift along with it and grab a first. Though that's something you can do, and I would send it. I'd send Swift out to every team looking for a first, because I didn't read the paragraph before the pick that explained his tank the year before and all that. I looked at the team. I said that's not ready to compete. I'm going to start trying to see what I can do for next year. The quarterback situation has put him in a pickle, and the only way around that is to start building towards next year.
Yeah, I think getting picks is never a bad thing. Yeah, like they're going to be assets you can trade for something somewhere, or make the pick if you have to.
Right. And then one of my favorite things to do, test your league mates out, drop 3 first on them and try to get Mahomes or Allen or Hurts. If that doesn't work, send them 2 and send them Richardson or AJ Brown. Just see what it costs to get one of those 3. That if you can get them for 3 first, then you got a steal.
And I like the idea of doing like Richardson and 2 first, because obviously he was a first that's still worthy of a first round pick. I think Richardson is worth at least a first in a 14-team Superflex, if not more. So you might be able, so you might be able to look at that, and the person you're trading with might be like, well, I'm getting a haul for this. Like this is worth it. That's 2 firsts for Richardson and then 2 other ones. So that could be a nice way to play that too. The other thing to kind of what you said about with Dutch Dynasty, he's got Tua and Justin Herbert are his top 2 QBs. So giving up Bryce Young for a stud receiver like AJ Brown might not be a bad move. He might. I mean, again, his receivers are Drake London, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, like a lot of those names that are in that wide receiver 2-3 conversation. But he doesn't have a stud 1. And that might be a trade too if he's looking at that. Like, well, okay, I can get AJ Brown. Like you said, he's at his peak. Like that may be a good move. So I like that logic a lot. Drew, what do you think about those trades? Anything that stood out to you on there?
Yeah, I actually tried to send Richardson in a 12-team league that I'm competing in. Tried to send Richardson for AJ Brown plus a little bit, and got shot down immediately. So I pivoted from there. But yeah, I love that idea of getting if you can send AJ Brown and get a really good quarterback back that has a future as well. I'll be honest, I know we've been talking about values and so forth. I didn't get a chance to plug earlier. DTC is my go-to when I start, kind of formulating when I put my trades together. I love that it integrates with MFL, but I love that it's fluid with the value set. Even last week, I was putting together a Richardson trade, and I watched his value change from last week till this week, based on the things that have happened in the market there. So, and remind me, Bob, it's super reasonable still for a year subscription, right, to DTC?
Yes. I mean, it's $3 a month, or I believe it's still $20 for the whole year.
$20 for the year. It's unreal. So. So yeah, I love DLF, and I go there, and I love their ADP and some of the tools they've got and the ability to import your leagues and so forth. But, whenever I'm double checking, or if I'm kind of trying to figure out where do I want to start, and, if I know I have a league mate that's pretty dependent on trade values, I love how easy DTC is to go to. So I'm looking at, as I'm building some of these trades with Richardson, how do I pull something together, and I can, let somebody know, hey, this is what it looks like according to this calculator. What do you think? So I appreciate you guys keeping that pretty fluid, because that for me is so valuable, especially in season. Off season and not in the non-point scoring. DLF is really cool to see with everybody doing the mock drafts and stuff. Yep. But I appreciate how accessible DTC is as well.
Yeah, that is Izzy is on top of that.
Yeah, and it takes real trades into account. I mean, DLF I think does the same, but like I love that it takes in actual trades to make values. It's not just somebody saying, oh, I'm holding my finger up in the wind and it's he's worth a first. Like, no, this is actually what we're seeing people trade him for. That's the market I want. Mm-hmm. That's the info that matters. And I think too, since we're on this DTC kick, I like using both because they're very different and have different pros and cons. And sometimes you can find a trade that works well on one and be like, all right, let me send that. But then you send the screenshot for DLF and be like, look at this, you're making out like a bandit. You know what I mean? But I like it because of the DTC values or vice versa, right? So you can kind of play them against each other. I know sometimes, go ahead.
The key is to find out which one your league mates use.
Exactly.
And then you go find your,
find what works with that trade calculator. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love doing that. And I'm with you too, though, Drew. I like to start a lot of my trades in a calculator just to see if I'm way off. And a lot of times what I have found, and I mentioned this on the show before, what I have found is I'll put it in the calculator, be like, oh, I can probably get more than I thought. Like, oh, hell, that value is more than I expected, So like I'll send an offer with an extra second in there that I wouldn't have done if I hadn't gone to the calculator. So, I mean, and I'm not saying everybody needs them, but that's where I've had a lot of extra value come back my way, where trades get accepted with more than I expected, right? Just like, oh, okay, well, I would have gladly done it for less. If you'd countered, I would have done it.
You're making me think here. Speaking of charity and fantasy cares, maybe based on how reasonable DTC is, maybe I gift that to some of my league mates next year,
There
so
you
I know that
go.
that's the one that they're using.
I was just going to say that helps you too. That's brilliant. Yeah.
I actually responded to somebody with a trade that way. Told
Like, you're bad
them
at
I
this.
would
Here's
buy
your
them a
subscription.
subscription. And
Yeah. 3
yes.
months is $10, right? That's half your season there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's not a bad idea.
That's
I like
brilliant.
that. Actually, I get a lot of really bad offers in one of my home leagues. I might have to do that. Just be like, hey, I'm helping you. I'm helping me. Like, let's just stop beating around this bush. I like that. All right. Well, I think that covers us pretty well. Hopefully, Jim, you got some really good ideas there. I think we're all on the same page. If sending Richardson might not be a bad idea, he's maybe one of your better pieces. But if you're really wanting to contend, he's not going to help you do that. If you're trying to rebuild, I don't think really many of our trades were toward that. I think some of Bob's, I guess, were more on the pick side. But if you're trying to rebuild again and kind of going into the tank again, then I would hold Richardson and see what you can get for some of the other pieces. You've got a stud receiver room. I completely agree. I think if there's a way that you could send one of those receivers and somehow get a tight end, that might be kind of like a good idea or kind of neat. But if you're going to have to pay up in that league for tight ends that matter. So going after a Jonnu Smith, going after K. Otten, even like some of these like lower, very lower tier guys might not be the worst idea. Maybe that's the angle you go by, and hopefully you can get something done. Hopefully when you do, send us a tweet, put DMs, whatever you want to call it. We love hearing people get actual trades done on the show. So with that, I think we're going to call it a day. I appreciate you being here, Bob. Again, let people know where they can find you on the X and what you got going on.
Find me at Bob Gilchrist FF, and I am always working on something. Make sure you're following DTC. I am posting trades or rankings all the time. Make sure you're following Fantasy Cares. You never know when we have a good contest going on, and that is probably the only place you're gonna find me.
Well, I know you're busy with a lot of stuff, so
you might find Bob in some random trivia rooms as well. I know, during COVID, we would catch each other there in Clubhouse periodically. So I don't know, you still doing trivia anywhere, Bob, or you're good for some fun?
No, I have not.
Tidbits.
I was doing pretty good there for a while on that. But I don't know. Is Clubhouse still a thing?
I actually don't know.
The app keeps updating, but I've gone back to real bar trivia at this point.
Yeah, I actually had a trade this week that I had sent out a few times and kept getting rejected, and I couldn't see why. I sent out Cooper Kupp and Keenan Allen for Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Cooper Kupp and Keenan Allen for Amon-Ra.
Are you going to trade years for points?
In that situation, it depends on my team build, I guess, more. But if I like the points, and especially with depth, I mean, Keenan and Kupp are both starters for me, and I think you're probably getting about the same points this year, at least from Amon-Ra, that you would from Kupp most weeks. And you get the bonus points of Allen. I would make that trade and take the two receivers probably in most situations. What about you, Drew?
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, I think I was expecting once Jameson Williams came back and once some other guys got healthy, maybe Amon-Ra would cool off a little bit. But it seems like he is solidifying himself in that, I don't know what, top 5, top 6 receivers, depending on what your points look like, what your scoring looks like in your league. So, yeah, we talked about this a little while ago too. I think I tend to be a little bit maybe greedier in some of these bigger trades where, I want to hedge a little bit more. So Keenan Allen is, and both Cooper Kupp are both, kind of on the downslope of their careers here. But again, if you're pushing for a championship this year and you need the starters and you can use those points, you can definitely make a case for that. I think probably I'd push pause on that or see if I can get a little bit more back, maybe like a third or a late second or something like that, just so I feel like I could maybe recoup a little bit of youth next year. But you can certainly make a case for either side of that. But I think personally, in most leagues that I'm in, unfortunately, Bob, I think I'd probably send that back to you at face value.
That was what I saw when we put up the poll too, 50-50.
50-50. Those are the best trades, aren't they? When it actually comes back 50-50, it's like everybody agrees that this is a good trade for both sides, Like that's the fun part about this. And I know Puff Pass has been in the chat all night. He said that's a good trade for St. Brown side. He also mentioned this before. I want to make sure I mention this, but like, careful, Hall, don't mess with Texas. I was talking about the Texans. He also, since we're talking about Cup, 2 girls, 1 cup is the best team name I've come across. I love that team name too. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of, I appreciate you passing the chat tonight. There's a whole bunch of different names out there that can involve Cup. Let's just put it at that. But again, thank you so much for joining us, Bob. It's been a pleasure having you. I know you got a lot of content, at least in your brain, that you can't tell us about, that we'll find out about at some point. I know you're working on a lot of different things behind the scenes, and we appreciate you being here. Follow us at Dynasty Junkies. You can follow me at Andrew Hall FF. You can follow Drew at DR_PRA. Rocky doesn't get his read because he's not here. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Follow us at the DAP Network on the Twitters and the YouTubes and all the other socials. I don't know what they are anymore. Again, thank you to Puff Pass for hanging out in the chat. We had a couple people. Albert was in there earlier. We also had a Mr. Football in there saying that we all look very handsome, which is flattering and confusing at the same time. So I like that. But yeah, other than that, I think that's all we got. So we'll kick it over to you, Drew, to kick us out of here tonight.
Yeah, I think that's it. Junkies out.